Hi, welcome back to Books, a monthly video series where I talk through some of the books that I've read this month, little mini reviews, some thoughts and recommendations. It's been a nice relaxing start and I have some really great books to share with you which I'm really excited about, so let's get into it. Every year I start by reading some essays from this book, Against Everything. These essays were written over 10 years, I think. Greif was the founder and principal editor of M+1, a literary magazine. The essays represent a collection of basically pop culture and philosophy, and they form a kind of manifesto for being honest about why we do things and being critical, and basically calling for us to not be so accepting of the way that things are as a standard and to examine ourselves and how we act in the public life. It's really interesting. It dives into some pretty intense and controversial topics at times. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. The essay that I always read from this collection at the start of every year is an essay called The Concept of Experience, Greif's ideas of perfectionism drawn from Thoreau and Cavell, that instruct us to look at the world around us and challenge ourselves to get better all the time, and I just find that really inspiring. And the passage which I always read is about how the self responds to these new experiences and becomes broader and multiplicity. The self that responds to each summons isn't a fixed entity in perfectionism. To each example, each person and thing, the self answers, "This is me," or "This is not me." Each response by the self constitutes an experience. Each discovery of an example worthy of yourself pushes forward a change towards a next or higher self, or opens a new aspect of who one is. The self may only truly exist in responding and corresponding to the world, or it may in fact be a series of selves, each drawing a circle around the objects with which it finds new correspondences. Perfectionism, too, has its simple steps. Regard all things as if they were examples, which state simply the way of life they incarnate. Understand that each of these examples, when experienced, makes a summons to yourself. Experience things in this way, always inquiring of them. What way of life do you express? What do you say to me? And you'll learn what it is that lives in you. If you are called to change your life by any example and your self responds, you must change your life. And once you change again. Your next self too will be challenged by examples to find a next self waiting beyond still. Thus there is no perfection in perfectionism. The process of experience and correspondence never stops. If there could be any end in view, it would be only this: that the circle of things corresponding to you grow not wider but infinitely wide, touching everything that exists. That passage really inspires me and excites me at the start of every year. So yeah, Against Everything, one of the best essay collections, one of my all-time favourites, really, really worth reading. It's 10 years of work that just has produced such a wonderful collection that I think is only going to age, become better and better. I just really love this collection. So speaking of the self that contains multiplicity, I would like to talk about this book which I read over the break, Andrea Lawlor's Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl. This book is so good. Where to even begin to describe it? It follows our anti-hero protagonist Paul, who is moving his way through the queer club scene in Iowa City when we meet him, and we soon realise that Paul actually has this magical ability to shapeshift, to make himself more muscular or more skinny, to lower or higher his voice, to grow breasts, and to change his genitalia from a penis to a vagina, or both, or neither. Paul is a magical creature existing in a magical realist world, which is the queer scene in the United States in the 1990s, basically. Paul is an absolutely irresistible antagonist for me. I think one of the strengths of the novel is that even though Paul is always shape-shifting, Paul's voice and ideas, no matter who he is presenting as, they are continual and they are always the same. We always feel like we're with Paul. We always feel like his opinions and his view on the world doesn't change. And his view is so inspiring because it's an adventure in infinite sexuality and infinite gender identity. Paul is nothing and everything and both and neither all at the same time, and it's just a wonderful exercise in liminality. It also touches on the impact of the AIDS crisis on the queer community in the United States, particularly in New York, which is where that kind of all started. And there's a really touching kind of sequence, which is just really emotional, about relationships and dealing with that in the community. But yeah, I just loved it, and I just can't recommend it enough. And Andrea Lawlor, they are just an incredible author. This is really great. I loved it. I also read This Terrible Country from Fitzcarraldo Editions, written by Keith Gessen. The protagonist, Andrea, is a first-generation immigrant from Russia who goes back to Moscow to look after his grandmother because his brother flees the country. It's a really interesting take on Russia from a outsider-insider, which I find really interesting because I'm a dual national. I recognised so many of the experiences in this book as my own. Being able to communicate but not so well that you pass off as a native, not fitting in. Andrea finds that he never fit in the United States, which is how I feel about the United Kingdom, and he never fit in Moscow, which is how I feel about St. Petersburg. So it's this really interesting negotiation between identity, country, politics, and there's lots of really interesting commentary on the sort of socialist and communist resistance in Russia in the modern day, so in 2008 when the book is set. I don't want to give any spoilers, so I won't, but there is some really interesting, Andrei's story takes a really interesting turn. Also, his relationship with his babushka is really nice, just touching. She's really funny and cutting and witty, but she also has this she is very symbolic of this older woman who has carried so much and been through so much in the Soviet Union and had so much taken from her, but that also remembers the Soviet Union with this kind of nostalgic warmth, because that was when all her friends were there and they were resisting. And Svetlana Alexievich talks about this generational trauma that happens for Russians because pain is part of the fabric of what we as a nation and what we as a sort of culture have been through, and how deeply rooted that is. And I think this touches on that in a really nice way that's sometimes funny and sometimes heartbreakingly sad. As his grandmother becomes more and more forgetful, it's just really heartbreaking to see him trying to continue to bond with her and find out more about what her life was like. And I think we can all identify with that, trying to bond with older grandparents and find out about their history before it's too late and they don't remember. But yeah, it's just really touching and sweet and funny and has so many interesting things. It's such an interesting frame to view modern Russia through. And I also just really enjoyed the style of the writing. I thought the voice was really just very readable, very nice. I feel like I really empathise with Andrei's position in relation to nationality and culture and identity. So I don't know how it would read not having that, but I really enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. I picked up this short little book, a little anthology in the local charity shop near me. It was published by Pushkin Press with the London Library in 2016. The London Library is it's a private members library, so not a public library. And they have put together this anthology of basically writing on books and libraries that relates very specifically to the London Library. So for example, there's a little launch essay by Ian Forster on the London Library. There's also an essay by Virginia Woolf on how one should read a book. She was the daughter of the president of the London Library, so it's all things relating to the London Library. It's quite a nice little collection. It's a very brief read. The design is nice. I really like the title and this cover image. The essays are fine. I think a better book on libraries would be Ali Smith's Public Library, which has short stories written by Ali Smith and they're interluded by little quotes from different authors and people on the power of public libraries, and that's a really moving collection. I think this is just, it's novel, it's interesting, it's a cute little collection. I also read this by Akwaeke Emezi. It's Freshwater. This was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2019. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. It's a really interesting story. I don't want to give anything away, to be honest. I think it's really good to go in cold, but the voices in there are really unique, and the way that it's written is just really gripping. I found myself just sliding through the narrative because it was written from this kind of otherworldly, out-of-body experience. It almost had a feeling of a chorus. It had this real sense of impending doom throughout, which was quite anxiety-inducing as you read it, because you feel like there's an inevitable fatality to the story, and as it progresses you feel more and more sucked in by the drama and the tragedy of what is happening. It basically follows, it's just an incredible narrative. The voices are so compelling. Prose is slippery and haunting and surreal. It's just brilliant and absurd and scary and fantastic, and just really loved it. I've also been reading this, The Gallows Pole by Benjamin Myers. Myers is from the same area of Yorkshire that I'm from, the Calder Valley, and the story follows a local historical series of events. So it's a historical fiction. The novel is set in the late 18th century. It was inspired by real events and real people known as the coiners, a gang that were forging money in and around the Calder Valley. It's my understanding that a TV show is in the works about this. I think it will be a bit of a Peaky Blinders type of thing, so if you liked that, then you will probably like Gallows Pole. This book is good. It's well written and I enjoyed it, and lots of people have raved about it, which is great, and it's always good to see somebody from my area getting recognition for their writing. It didn't do it for me all the time, and by the end I was actually kind of tired of the style, because there's very little relief from the relentlessness of it, which is fine. But I found that I wanted to know a little bit less name dropping for places and people in the Calder Valley, which doesn't really do it for me, and more about the actual coiners and what they were doing, and what the police investigation around it was. I kind of felt more like I wanted a bit of that detail, and actually my dad, who also read this, was suggesting, and I thought this was quite a good suggestion, that the sort of stream of consciousness narrative might have been broken up by legal documents or something, or like I can't remember what the word is when they have when it's written in letters. Epistolary? I've never said that word out loud. Epistolary novel. The way a novel's written when it's written in correspondence. I think it would be nice if the stream of consciousness narrative was broken up by an epistolary kind of letters, either from the detective or from the agent working on the case, who's a kind of sub-character. That might have been a way to break up the stream of consciousness, because it didn't really feel like it was saying anything. It was just a lot of repetitive feeling related stuff. So like, for example, here's kind of a taste of the voice. There's a coin going through my fingers like water down a waterfall. There's a peck in the cupboard and bottles full to the stopper of barley broth, and there's plenty of bints to empty my nutmegs in when it is they need emptying, which is often a different piece every night if I want it. There's bloody blisters or calluses on these hands. He drew phlegm up from the back of his throat and he held it there, and this is all just, it's just sensory, and I just wanted a little bit more meat to the story. But I'm looking forward to seeing them make it into a Peaky Blinders-esque show, and I look forward to seeing more of my hometown on TV, like I do already with Gentleman Jack and Happy Valley and Last Tango in Halifax and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, I guess I'm happy that the book is out there, and the coiners are super interesting. So it's definitely worth a read, but it might leave you wanting more. Finally, I just wanted to touch on a gift that I received. This was given to me by a friend, and it's absolutely beautiful art book. It's called Notes on Snow. This is by an artist also from the Calder Valley called Julia Ogden. She has created this gorgeous collection of drawings from photographs and notes that she made over lockdown walks in nature in winter in the Calder Valley. It's really nice. It reminds me of the Calder Valley, which is lovely. And yeah, if I just show you some of the work, here's some of the pages. Just really beautiful. Can't recommend it enough. A really sweet gift for wintertime, and just really thoughtful and lovely. And that's it really. I will be back next month with more books. As always, tell me what you've been reading below. If you've read anything that I recommended in previous videos, please tell me, because that always makes my heart just sing. I hope you're having a really great start to the year, and if you're not, I hope it picks up soon. Take care out there, and I will see you soon.